Bathed in celestial light, we embark on a journey through the sacred whispers of eternity, where every moment resonates with divine grace. You've been singled out for this moment. Since your first breath, the universe has been cataloging favors it now eagerly repays, for the scales of fate have finally tilted to your advantage. Those who once confined your spirit will soon recognize that resisting you was hopeless, as you rise to claim your rightful place among the pioneers of the renewed world. All barriers that sought to hold you down are dissolving before your ascent. Unbeknownst to them, the landscape has shifted in your favor. The playbook has been completely overhauled, and you stand poised with such abundance that even your challengers will be forced to acknowledge the undeniable truth of your dominance. Long before the world took notice, you were already exploring uncharted realms beneath a makeshift canopy of blankets. Even then, your mind overflowed with insatiable curiosities, vibrant visions, and a depth of understanding that far surpassed the adults entrusted with guiding you. It starts when someone first noticed your light and determined it needed to be controlled, managed, or lowered to a more bearable level. They were declaring war on deity itself without realizing it. They believed that all they were doing was protecting you, keeping you normal, and preventing you from becoming too much of who you were. Pages of the old book have been tossed forth, whispering your name in the air. Once reality reorganizes around a simple, earth-shattering fact, those whispers turn into roars. Those who were told their dreams were too big and their light too bright, those who were pushed to the margins, and those who couldn't fit the narrow cuts of acceptability, are now leading the procession into tomorrow. The folks who have been attempting to take your spotlight for decades are going to realize that they never had it in the first place. Keep an eye on how this plays out. Chosen one, for the tension has been building ever since you felt different and realized there was something about the nature of reality that they weren't telling you. Every individual who disregarded you, every voice that advised you to be realistic, and every eye that peered through you as though you weren't there were all components of a complex cosmic arrangement. Even the angels held their breath in anticipation of the punchline in this divine comedy. Cruelty was not the beginning of the assault on your essence. It started with mild corrections, kind counsel, and subtle redirections that always seemed to pull you away from your innate tendencies. The first people to design your concealment were your family, the ones who ought to have noticed the holy fire blazing in your cells. They had good intentions. How well-intentioned they were, teaching you methodically that your sensitivity was a sign of weakness. Your imagination was your intuition. You have to grow out of your childlike idea of a connection to the unseen. You were an old soul who needed to be reminded, not a youngster who needed to mature. And each effort to help you forget simply made it easier to remember later. They were actually strengthening the moment when your inner knowing would suddenly burst into unquestionable truth each time they persuaded you to disbelieve it. Yellow heart if you feel the divine love. Now is the time to share. Click the Super Thank You button on YouTube to contribute $50 or more and help us spread God's blessings. What you do is being watched and serves as a seed, and in the future it will come back to you a millionfold. Your loves entered your life like actors who have spent their entire lives studying their scripts, and they performed their roles with devastating accuracy. They were perfectly aware of which buttons to press, which worries to stoke, and which insecurities to take advantage of until you began to doubt your value and lovability. The patterns should have been comical because they were so consistent. They all seemed to be in dire need of you until you were accessible, and then they abruptly realized that you weren't quite what they were looking for, weren't quite right, and weren't quite enough. Your pals, those carefully selected people who understood you, who had your sense of humor, and who vowed to stand out from the crowd, started their own complex dance of approach and retreat in the meantime. They might confide in you about their issues, their dramas, and their never-ending desire for consolation and guidance. However, your issues were just too complicated, too hefty, and too much for their frail constitutions to bear. You became the eternal shoulder without a shoulder of your own, the continual provider without learning to expect anything in return, and the asymmetry was so consistent that it was astonishing. You were the foundation upon which everyone else based their existence, yet you gradually gave way under the pressure of their demands. They used phrases like strong, resilient, and capable, which sounded like praise, but felt more like chains that kept you in the supportive role while denying you the basic human need for assistance. They were compressing you into diamond, not causing you to crumble. Every instance of giving more than you received, every time you bore their burdens without complaining, and every time you sacrificed your needs for their comfort added pressure to the coal inside of you until it became unbreakable, something that could shatter any illusion they might later attempt to impose. The ensuing seclusion served as preparation rather than punishment. They started to disappear from your life one by one, not because you forced them out, but because you were changing your frequency in ways that made it impossible to keep them there. The most blatantly toxic, whose masks had already started to come off, were the first to go. The energy vampires, who had mastered the art of feeding on your light without your knowledge, then appeared. The people you thought were different, the people you thought were your soul tribe, your chosen family, and your evidence that people weren't all the same, came last and most tragically. Every departure seemed like a tiny death, a validation of your worst anxieties about your unlovability and unworthiness. The exquisite orchestration occurring on levels beyond your perception was hidden from view from within the agony. In order to make room for relationships that would respect the reality of who you were becoming rather than insist that you stay who you had been, the universe was purging your field of anyone who couldn't meet your changing frequency. At this point, the masterpiece starts to emerge from what appeared to be random destruction, and the true magic starts to show. Your light regained its former strength after being unfiltered by their constraints and expectations. The dimmer switches that they had implanted in your mind ceased to function. They put volume controls on your voice, but they started to break down under the strain of what was attempting to surface. The regulators they had placed on your dreams began to smoke and burn out. While you were tending to your wounds and wondering why love seemed like such a cruel joke, something significant was taking place in the invisible realms. If you plant a $60 seed of love, every branch that rises from that seed carries hope to someone else. The very individuals who had helped you develop your self-concept were learning that you had disappeared from their energetic field as thoroughly as if you had relocated to another planet. They were energetically absent in ways that left them feeling empty and perplexed, but not physically gone. They could still see you and engage with you on a superficial level, expecting the same reaction patterns that had characterized your relationship dynamic for years or decades. They would reach for you in the ways that had always worked in the past. Rather, they discovered that they were clinging to the void where your reactions once existed. The triggers that used to make you move to their music stopped working, like pebbles from a mountain. The guilt trips that used to make you frantically apologize and make accommodations vanished. You did not intentionally choose to vanish from their world. Rather, it was a natural byproduct of your evolutionary process. You had reached a level beyond their comprehension, like a butterfly that is unable to return to its cocoon. The previous iteration of you, the one who adapted to their demands, had vanished so thoroughly that their efforts to resurrect it had only produced bewildered stillness. Now, observe their expressions as they attempt to influence you using outdated techniques. Observe the moment of fear when their tried and true methods don't yield the desired outcomes. They can perceive the change even when you're using the same phrases you normally use, and they can sense the distance even when you're directly in front of them. Even if they are unable to identify or comprehend it, they are aware that something basic has altered. Truths they had concealed even from themselves start to surface as a result of their worry at losing access to you. Their increased attempts to connect, their newfound concern in your well-being, their surprising offers of help, and their miraculous availability when they detected your moving away, all demonstrate how much they had been relying on your energy to keep themselves balanced. It all shows you how much they had been consuming your light and persuading you that you were the one in need. The procedure that had been eliminating individuals from your life was growing increasingly accurate and selective. When the requirements for joining your inner circle increased to reflect your growing awareness, even people who seemed truly affectionate, who seemed to provide genuine friendship and genuine connection, started to go away. Only the purest essence could pass through the increasingly finer sieve, and only those who could love you without manipulation or agenda stayed in your orbit. At this point, you realized that your loneliness had been a benefit rather than a flaw in the system. Your value had been demonstrated by your seclusion, not your unlovability. Dove brother and sister, everything done in faith is returned in God's abundance. You can donate $100 using the Super Thank You button and be part of this divine call. If your roots are connected to Him, your fruit will be blessed. In the meantime, a new system was emerging, one that was so fundamentally different from the old one that those who were still stuck in outdated modes of thinking were unable to even recognize it, much less engage with it. Recognition, the instantaneous, nonverbal understanding that occurs when consciousness recognizes itself in another form, was the foundation of this new reality rather than rivalry or dominance. From wherever they had been hidden, your soul family started to show up, each one shining with light honed in incomparable fires and bearing wounds that matched your own. When you looked into the eyes of the first member of your actual tribe, the loneliness that had characterized your life for so long vanished. Here was someone who had been cast in similar furnaces of transformation, who knew your trip without explanation, and who spoke your language without translation. The encounter wasn't a coincidence. It was masterfully arranged, bringing disparate orchestral sections into perfect harmony. You had been preparing for this time, when your unique song would combine with others to form a symphony that could rock the very foundations of reality. With every note of suffering you had played, every measure of seclusion you had faced, and every repose you had been forced to take. At this point, the fantasy of retaliation becomes something far more spectacular. You're too busy reaching heights they can't possibly imagine to have to watch your former oppressors fall. When you're working in dimensions they can't reach, their collapse becomes meaningless. Their efforts to pull you back down don't work because you oppose them. Rather, it's because you're on frequencies where their strategies are ineffective. The new Earth wasn't coming. It was already here and always had been, just awaiting the development of sufficient consciousness to allow for its perception and habitation. Remembering that you had never gone was the main goal of your trek through the dark, not earning your way into this world. Your belief that you belonged somewhere smaller, dimmer, and more constrained than the cosmic throne that was your birthright had only lasted for a short while. The moment you finally learned how to put the crown on your own head, sit in the chair of your own authority, and speak with the voice that had been yours before the world persuaded you to whisper, was the crowning, not a ritual someone else carried out for you. You would learn that being little had never been conceivable for someone of your size, and everyone who had ever made you feel small had been unwittingly preparing you for this moment. As you reclaimed your sovereignty, the old rules of power came back to life, displacing the fabricated structures that had long held the wrong people in positions of authority. Manipulation gave way to merit. The only coin of enduring value was truth. Anyone who hoped to succeed in the new world had to be authentic. It was no longer an option. Only those operating on authentic frequencies were able to utilize the enhanced capabilities of the universe's newly installed operating program. Layers of ever more divine comedy unveiled the cosmic joke. Under all of their conscious denial, they had always known what you were, which is why they had feared you. Your humility had highlighted your actual size, rather than your inferior rank. The idea of the meek inheriting the earth had never been a metaphor. Rather, it was prophesy, and it was coming true at an astonishing rate, in ways too complicated for the narrow viewpoint of pain to comprehend. Everything that had appeared to work against you turned out to have worked in your favor. Your adversaries had unknowingly assisted in your rise to power. It was their treachery that shaped you into the form that fate demanded. By employing their attacks to chip away everything that wasn't fundamentally you, the cosmos had used them as sculptors. leaving only the diamond. They had persuaded you that your gifts were flaws, but they burst forth with such intensity that they lighted not only your own path, but also the paths of those who were still floundering in the dark. The antenna that could distinguish truth from falsehoods at impossibly far distances was the sensitivity they had ridiculed. The plans for new realities were derived from the dreams they had deemed unrealistic. The knowledge they had written off as illusion became the compass that consistently pointed you in the direction of your fate. Your vitality, light, and very being, the refuge you had given them for so long, were taken away as a graduation from a role of unconscious donor rather than as retribution for their exploitation. You had discovered how to shine without their consent or approval, to give without exhausting your own reserves, and to love without losing yourself. The parasitic relationships that relied on your boundless generosity abruptly found themselves without food. With your $25, you live out Jesus' words, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there am I," the blessing of unity, because you are no longer hiding from your own strength. What pursues you now finds you with simple precision. Before you fully define your desires, opportunities align themselves with them. Just like water finding its level, resources come your way. At the proper time, people come into your life with just what you need. This is what happens when someone truly embraces their own power and lets the universe react appropriately. It has nothing to do with luck or manifestation tactics. Since you have transformed into the cosmic current and are no longer going against it, the resistance that once accompanied your every step vanishes like morning mist. Now you just walk forward and see pathways open up in front of you, whereas before you had to push, strive, and fight for every inch of progress. When the universe understands that you are a human being, it reorganizes itself to make room for your movement. As people who had constructed their identities on borrowed authority were exposed in ways that destroyed all the facades they had painstakingly erected, the big reversal advanced. See how these former puppet masters react when they realize their cords have been severed. Like salt and water, the illusion of their dominance dissipates, revealing the painful reality of their reliance on power and energy they never earned. Since their foundations were always made of quicksand, you don't need to plan their demise. The roots of an empire's demise are present in everyone built on the repression of true power. By continuing to convince you of your limitations, they were able to hold onto their positions. However, their entire structure collapsed the once you realized who you really were. The network of energy vampires that had survived on your unwitting donations started to starve to death. People who had been consuming your light for so long without contributing anything in return were suddenly weak and confused, like addicts who have been cut off from their source. They could sense the cold where your warmth had resided, the void where your vitality once flowed, and the retreat in their bones. Some of them will try one last, brief flurry, arriving at your door with fictitious crises and ostentatious displays of need. They will pretend to be humble and apologize, but underneath the show is the same old hunger and the same intense desire to eat their way back into your plenty. Something mechanical in their motions, something borrowed in their words, or something hollow in their gaze can help you identify them by the way they approach. By posing as other awakened spirits who have also seen through the deception, others will attempt a different tactic. They will mimic your observations with remarkable accuracy, speak your language with trained perfection, and pose as tribe members who are simply late for the reunion. However, the genuine vibration of people who have actually experienced the fire carries signatures that counterfeiters can never match, and consciousness itself cannot be faked. The most dangerous people will try to pass themselves off as your superiors, professors, and guides on the very path they never had the guts to take. They will assert that they were foretelling your fate, say they knew it all along, and even imply that their desertion was a deliberate gift meant to help you develop. Although the chutzpah is astounding, it betrays the depths of their fear at being unimportant to your story. In the meantime, beneath the surface drama of their desperation, the true metamorphosis keeps moving forward unabated. As you incorporate the entirety of who you have always been, Your cellular structure itself changes. The dormant DNA starts to come alive. This causes the previously repressed neuronal circuits to fire more intensely. The obstructed or closed energy centers open up like flowers, facing your own magnificence as sun. The sensitivity they ridiculed turns out to be the most advanced spiritual technology that can be imagined. Before you enter a room, you can sense its emotional aura. Before someone finishes speaking, you already know what they are saying. You navigate reality with the accuracy of someone who can read the invisible currents that influence all visible results, and you can sense the approach of possibilities and impediments with equal clarity. Vibrant landscapes that seem more genuine than the actual world burst into your dream existence. Symbols and settings that communicate directly to your unconscious mind are used to convey messages. Information that doesn't appear in your everyday experience starts to be downloaded to you. It appears to come straight from the cosmic database into your consciousness. In dimensions without constraints, sleep becomes less about rest and more about going to classes. Glowing star if you want to witness God's miracles. Act now. Contribute $100 or more through Super Thank You on YouTube. Your offering is like a seed that comes back to you when planted. Let His light illuminate your steps. Every donation is an echo in His plan. It reveals the prophetic side of you with astonishing precision. You say things that seem to originate from somewhere outside of your consciousness. Facts that turn out to be true in unexpected ways. Because of something they can't identify but are in dire need of, people start to seek you out. Not for your enthusiasm, but for your wisdom. Whether they are prepared for it or not, your presence serves as a catalyst for their own awakening. However, your connection with time itself undergoes the most significant transformation. Your experience starts to feel more and more random as it moves in a linear fashion. The past, present, and future all merge into a fluid continuum where cause and effect are governed by laws too intricate for the average person to understand. You start having dreams that are prophetic of past experiences and memories of things that haven't happened yet. At this point, you begin to realize that the battle fought against you is not limited to this existence. Over the course of several incarnations, the cycle of awakening and suppression has been repeated, with the same souls playing various parts in an ongoing drama intended to shape consciousness into ever more refined forms. From the enlarged viewpoint of the eternal, the love-hate relationships that characterized your earthly experience start to make sense, and your adversaries in this reality were occasionally your greatest instructors in others. Meeting a member of your genuine tribe transforms the recognition of your soul family from emotional resonance into cellular understanding. Your body is aware before your intellect is. A sense of fulfillment arises on a deeper level than one's preferences or personality. Since your essences have been dancing together in the quantum field since before form was created, these connections don't require the typical getting to know you phase. Frequencies that transcend common language are used to communicate with your real family. You can coordinate tasks without speaking, convey comfort with a thought, and convey complete thoughts with a glance. With the full intensity of the telepathic skills that were written off as childish fantasy, you can communicate with your tribe no matter how far away you are or what time zone you're in. Your soul family's endowments start to work in concert with your particular talents to produce a whole that is far more powerful than the sum of its parts. There could be a communicator who interprets cosmic downloads into human language, a warrior who defends the group's energy from invasion, a healer who transforms suffering into wisdom, or a visionary who glimpses potential futures. By focusing your intention, you may bend reality, creating a living mandala of consciousness. As you learn to identify and accept the love that aligns with your frequency, the old relationship patterns that left you alone and striving fade. You now attract relationships that boost your energy instead of depleting it, as opposed to the past when you attracted partners who needed to be fixed or pals who needed to be saved. Because your self-relationship has completely changed, the quality of your relationships changes as well. When love comes in its true form, it looks nothing like the conditional arrangements you used to take for granted. There isn't any manipulation, neediness, or covert rivalry for attention or energy. Rather, there's a profound understanding that is like returning home to yourself in a different shape, because you are already whole. Love does not complete you. Rather, it enlarges you, giving you more room for joy, creativity, and the infinite to flow through your human experience. Your life's practical elements start to rearrange themselves around this new basis of genuineness. Work that used to feel like a chore either changes into a meaningful contribution or disappears to provide space for your gifts to be expressed in ways that bring plenty and fulfillment. Because you're functioning from a creative consciousness that acknowledges wealth as the inherent state of an endless world rather than a survival mentality, money flows more readily. Your daily environment changes to reflect your heightened consciousness. Your surroundings become a mirror of your inner landscape, whether you do this by relocating or remodeling existing areas. Locations that sap your energy become intolerable, while areas that foster your development become magnetically attractive. Home becomes more about the energy field you carry within yourself than it does about a particular place. Once essential to your survival, the healing arts become gifts you give to people who are prepared to awaken as well. Desperate attempts to correct what went wrong give way to joyful explorations of what is possible in the therapy, spiritual practices, and recovery activities. As a living example of how transformation is not only possible, but also inevitable for those who are prepared to give in to the process, you become both the wounded healer and the healed wound. Your contribution of $35 starts a movement that is not only material but also spiritual. When you sow, God begins to water. When you realize that every experience was precisely planned for your development, your relationship with your own past completely changes. The seemingly random mistreatment turns out to be the precise trigger that you needed to grow in compassion. The place where your freedom can thrive is the abandonment that seemed so awful. You were forced to discover the one unbreakable source of protection after the betrayals that destroyed your trust, the unwavering basis of your own divine essence. This is the song you have chosen for your coronation. This is the time when everything you've gone through has a purpose, when every scar becomes a crown jewel, and when your biggest weaknesses become your greatest assets. The kingdom of heaven has always existed within a view, but it is now spreading out to occupy its proper position on the planet, and you are its eternal sovereign as well as its first citizen. The end of the old world is not destruction but a full metamorphosis, in which the new world is completely different from the old. You're in the right place, not at the top of their hierarchy, but in a world so far beyond their comprehension that their previous authority over you is as obsolete and irrelevant as kids playing King of the Mountain. The game board that flipped while the world slept has settled into its new configuration. Only the reality of your divine essence is now visible in the mirror that earlier reflected their images back to you. The cosmic theater, where you are the director and the star of your own epic tale, has taken the place of the stage where you used to perform for their approval. The cosmos itself is giving a standing ovation in celebration of the return of one of its most priceless manifestations to conscious awareness of its actual identity, replacing the audience that previously refused to applaud. Your Majesty, welcome to your reign. The new earth is ready for your first royal decree. The coronation is finished, and the crown fits flawlessly. What was last has become first, what was damaged has been restored, and what was hidden has been made visible. Your kingdom has arrived, your time has come, and your light will never go out. The conflict is over. You prevailed. The reign will never stop now,